Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Heart of a Youth Leader podcast and video series. Released every week on a Monday morning, but watch it at your leisure. Something short, hopefully to inspire you in your youth and children's work, to keep your eyes focused on Jesus and to live a life of worship. And over the last few weeks, I've been exploring the characteristics of Jesus and how they are attractive to young people. So much so that if we can actually introduce young people to who Jesus really is and who Jesus really was when he was alive on earth, then we would be surprised if young people don't want to follow him. The problem we have is we don't introduce them to who he really is. We introduce them to ourselves, or we introduce them to church, or we introduce them to Christianity as a religion, as a series of rules, of a series of expectations, and yet we need to get out of the way, and we need to be waiters taking them into the presence of the cook being Jesus himself. And I want to carry on that series. We're coming to an end. Don't worry if it's becoming a bit monotonous. I hope it's not, because we are talking about Jesus after all. And today I want to talk about how he was uncomplaining. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I can't think of a positive spin. There's not a word for someone who's uncomplaining other than uncomplaining. Someone who doesn't complain. And I'm just aware that a lot of us youth leaders, we're terrible moaners. We are complaining all the time. We can moan about the rest of the church. We can moan that the church doesn't want to do youth work. We can moan about our church leaders and our ministers, that they just don't get us, or they don't think we're a priority. Or we can feel frustrated that, am I the only one who cares about the young people or the lack of young people in our church? And we can be great complainers. We can be saying, I've been doing this long enough. I deserve better than this, or I don't know how much longer I can put up with these conditions. And a lot of them are justifiable. A lot of us don't moan for the sake of moaning, although I'm aware how we can easily get caught up in the cycle of moaning. Once we moan and we get received, we can think, well, that's the way to do it. I can remember a young person in my youth group years ago who every time we saw her and you asked her how she was, something had gone wrong. Something was terrible. And after a while, it felt like, you don't want to ask her how her week's been because you know it's going to be terrible. And then we hit on an idea of saying, rather than how's your week been, by saying, tell me something positive about your last week. And she struggled to begin with, but we'd insist, come on, there must be something that was good, something that brought a smile to your face, or something that you enjoyed, and even if it was tiny, what was good this week? And because we realised that we felt she was seeing her moaning, her complaining, how difficult life was her way of getting our attention, because we'd sit down and say, tell us more, oh you poor thing, it must be really tough. And she was getting our affection by life being difficult, almost like life needed to be difficult so she could get our affection as her youth leaders. And so we tried to get her to look for the positive, and slowly but surely we started to see a change in her demeanour and her character. Her personality started to become who she really was, rather than this moaning, complaining person. And the danger for us as youth and children's leaders is that we can become that moaning, complaining person. And yet Jesus never complained. And it's amazing when we look at the life of Jesus, how much he had to complain about if he chose to. He was misunderstood. People didn't get him. People abused him and mistreated him. He grew up in this middle of nowhere town of Nazareth, where for 30 years he wasn't allowed to do what he knew he'd come to the earth to do. He was just little old Jesus working in his father's carpentry shop, and then presumably took over the family business for a while until he was old enough to do what God has called him to do. And he knew this was coming, but he didn't rush it. In fact, when his mum tried to rush it, he said, actually, Mum, this isn't my time. I'm not ready. This isn't ready yet. And so he wanted to do it in the Lord's timing. He was patient. He wasn't grumbling. Do they not know who I am? Which, if anybody could say that, Jesus was the one who could say it. And to be involved in the creation of the universe and then to be this little unknown in the middle of nowhere for 30 years. Anyone else of us would have been complaining. We would have been writing to the newspapers and saying, hang on a minute, let me tell you who I am. I deserve more than this. I am the King of Kings. But Jesus doesn't. He just is patient. He's gentle and he's kind and he's loving and he waits his time. And then when his mission starts and people don't understand him, even his own brothers don't understand him. And he could get exasperated, but he chooses not to complain. He chooses not to go, oh, how much longer have I got to wait for you to catch up? And complain about their lack of understanding. He's gentle, he laughs, and he waits for them, and he helps them, because actually it's so big, it's hard for anyone humanly to understand it without looking back from the resurrection and the cross. And then he's homeless. He doesn't have, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay down his head. He has nowhere he calls home. What uncomfortable circumstances that would have been. And yet he chooses not to complain about it, because actually he realizes not having a home means he can move about a bit more. He can go to places without having to think about have I left the gas on? Have I left the toast in the toaster? And all that kind of stuff that we worry about when we're on our way to church on a Sunday morning. Jesus was uncomplaining and just going about what he knew the Father was calling him to do, even when it must have been difficult, it must have been painful, it must have been frustrating. And then right to the cross, and Jesus is hung up on the cross, surrounded by criminals, with the soldiers and the guards playing with dice to gamble for his clothing. And he doesn't get cross, go, look, what, you don't realise what you're doing, this is ridiculous, get me down from the cross. No, he says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. He's praying for them even on his moment of death. He's praying blessing, he's praying kindness and forgiveness for those who've mocked him, who've spat on him, who've whipped him, who've caused him immense pain. There's no complaining, there's no grumbling, there's just this loving, kind, selfless prayer for those who actually are inflicting the pain. Oh, for us to be like that. For us to be youth workers who never grumble, who never complain that we're not accepted, we don't get enough priority or budget or respect or profile, but we get on uncomplaining doing the job. When you talk to young people about who their heroes are, it's those people who just get on, those people who are inspirational, not grumbling, miserable, complaining people. People who complain about the world are not who we look up to. People who inspire us are people who see the world in a better way, people in a good way. And we want to be like that for our young people, because that's how Jesus was and is. So let's thank him for his uncomplainingness. That he doesn't, uncomplainingness, is that a word? It is now. Because we are so grateful that he doesn't moan about us, aren't we? That he puts up with us, he's patient with us, he's kind to us, he loves us. And I'm so grateful that he forgives me rather than grumbles and complains about me. Going, oh, Andy, you've known about this for so long. We've known each other for so long, and yet you still get it wrong. How many times? That's not the way Jesus, or our loving Heavenly Father, responds to us. It's with open arms, with delight, with love and kindness, going, Andy, you're one of the family. Come on in. Go for it.